Okay, Granny.
Don't ask me what date it is because I don't know.
Granny's Life Story, take 2.
So it's working. Okay, Granny.
Is it on now?
I think so.
Okay.
Is it on? Okay. Granny, when were you born?
October the 27th, 1910.
And what's your earliest childhood memory?
Well, I've been thinking about it. There's so many things that... But the first I remember was when my brother was born. You know, I was just about 2.5 or 3 years old.
And what do you remember about that?
Well, it was just, of course, being little like that, and they run us away from the house and all until after the baby was born. It was a mystery to me, you know. Of course, when they took my oldest brother, picked me up and carried me back in to see him. And then I knew, you know, why they'd run us off till that doctor brought the baby. That was their explanation.
Is there anything else you remember about that?
No.
What are the
I wasn't jealous of it or anything, you know, nothing like that. But I don't believe there was ever any jealousy in our family that way about anything. And, oh, there's so many little things that, you know, if I just sat and thought about them, I could think of it. But that was one of the main things, my earliest memory of it.
And tell us about the house you grew up in.
Well, it was just a big old frame farmhouse. It had let's see, how many rooms? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 rooms, no bath. No inside toilet.
So, where would you take your baths?
In a big number 3 tub. We heated our water on the wood stove and took our baths in the tub that way.
And who did you share a bedroom with?
My brother.
Your brother?
When we were little. After he was weaned and everything, Mama put him in the bed with me.
And tell us about the farm, the animals that were on the farm, and how big the farm was.
Well, let's see, the farm, I think it was 160 acres, you know. We had, on one side was a field where we farmed. On the other side was the pasture. And we had this huge orchard up there in the field, and it was... we had fruit you couldn't believe.
What kind of fruit?
Apples and plums, apricots, pears, blackberries.
And what about the animals? What animals were on the farm?
We had 2 teams of mules, and we had about 4 milk cows. And we had some sheep. I imagine about 60 head of sheep. And we had, it's unbelievable if you could have seen them, if the chickens we had, hundreds of them. And they got to where they'd go off in the pasture, you know, graze off in the pasture. They was everywhere. So that's the reason that I think we had chicken all the time.
Because there were so many chickens.
Mm-hmm.
So who milked the cows?
My mother. You know, my mother wouldn't let us milk the cows. She wouldn't let us strain the milk. She wouldn't let us get in the cooler to get any milk out. Cream, you know. It had cream, you know, way thick on it. She took care of all of that herself. She did the churning. She worked that butter out. And that's one thing that she wouldn't let us mess with at all.
So what chores did you guys have? What chores did the kids have?
What?
What chores did you have?
Well, we girls had to work in the house, wash the dishes, and the older ones cooked, and we did the washing. And we did the scrubbing. We had wood floors, and we scrubbed them. We didn't mop them. You know, we'd sweep all of the water out and rinse them off and things like that. It was, like I say, we was poor people. We didn't have all the things that made life easy.
So, what would you guys do for washing day? How did you wash the clothes?
With a rub board in a tub.
How far
And we
away
had,
was
it was a pretty good ways to where we did the washing, but we had a big pot to boil our clothes in, and we had big tubs to rub them on the rub board out and to rinse in. And we didn't have any clotheslines. We had the fence to hang them on, and the bushes to hang them on. And when we got through washing, well, we'd empty out all of the water and turn the pot bottom side up and hang the tubs up in a tree and the rub boards.
And what games did you play with your siblings?
Oh, we played, let's see, we played little baseball, you know.
What would you use for baseball bats?
Oh, broom handle or a hoe handle.
And what did you use for baseballs?
Mama made those for us.
How did she make them?
Well, I don't remember what she'd put in the middle, but it'd be something round. Then she'd take twine thread and roll it all the way around that and make it so big, and then she covered it with cloth, sewed cloth on it. Of course, it wouldn't bounce or anything like that, but we played with it anyway. And we'd play, we played Wolf Over the River. We played bullpen.
What's bullpen? How do you play bullpen?
Yeah, all get in a big circle, and one of them's in the middle. And he would throw the ball, or we would throw the ball. I forget just exactly how it done. But anyway, if he hit one of us, then he got out and we got in. Or if we hit him, he had to stand there.
And what was the other game? Something River?
Wolf Over the River.
What's that game?
Oh, I don't remember that one.
You just remember the name of it?
Yeah. But we didn't have any entertainment other than what we made ourselves, And we didn't have a telephone. We didn't, of course, back in those days, well, we never heard of a radio when I was a kid. We didn't have we didn't have electricity. We used kerosene lamps. And that was one of our jobs, was to clean those glass globes every day before night come, because it always get dirty and sooty,
Right.
So, and we'd fill them up with the oil and have them ready for night. And we'd, in the wintertime, Mama started reading to us every night. Zane Grey's books.
Oh.
Have you read those?
No.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of books?
They're Western books.
Western books.
Zane Grey, that's called his books. Of course, he had a title to them, but we always called it Zane Grey's book. And she'd read, we'd sit around the fireplace, and we'd rush up and get all of the dishes washed and cleaned up and get settled down, She wouldn't start until we got all of that done. And then she'd sit there and she'd read, maybe an hour and a half or maybe 2 hours. It depended on her voice. If she started getting a bit hoarse, she'd have to quit. But she did that in the wintertime while we was all sitting around there. Even Papa would sit and listen to her.
What do you remember about Christmases when you were growing up?
Well, I got to read that now. Papa and Mama would go to town a few days before Christmas, and they'd buy a box of apples. They called them crates then, big ones, and oranges, and a big sack of candy. And we never did see that because they went to town by themselves. We didn't go with them. If we got any presents, that's when they bought our presents. And the Papa'd slip in and he'd go upstairs and put all that stuff up there. Then on Christmas morning, Mama would be in the kitchen. She'd holler, "Hey, kids, I hear Santa Claus." We'd go in there, and he's upstairs, and he'd, back where we couldn't see him, and he'd pitch us down an orange and then an apple. I have a handful of candy.
What kind of candy was it?
It's that hard candy. Back then, we didn't have these chocolate candies and things like that. It's always a hard candy. And our Christmas gifts was very few. Each one of us got something.
What do you remember getting? What was the best Christmas gift you remember getting?
Well, the last Christmas gift I got when I was growing up, before I grew up completely, was a doll. And I didn't get it Christmas Eve night, like usually kids do. I got up the next morning and I was just so disappointed. I just couldn't find it. Mama said, "Well, look over there on the machine. Maybe it's over there." And I had a little box about so big. And had my doll stuff in there. And there laid a little doll about this long in that box. That's the last doll they ever bought me.
Was it a porcelain doll?
Oh, no. It was, I don't remember just exactly what it looked like. Because that is too long ago.
Microphone was off.
It's off.
It was off. Now it's back on.
I didn't touch it.
I must have turned it off. It's okay. We'll just keep rolling.
Don't touch any of the equipment. You just sit there and talking ahead.
Well, we didn't have much to say anyway along about that time.
Okay.
So Christmases, how else did you guys celebrate Christmas? Did you get a Christmas tree?
Mm-hmm.
And how would you guys decorate the Christmas tree?
How would we do what?
Decorate the Christmas tree?
Oh, with little colored ribbons and little colored pieces of material, and with popcorn stringers. And we didn't have electricity, so we didn't have any lights. We couldn't afford to put any candles around it because it's too dangerous for fire.
And tell us what a typical Sunday would be like with your family.
Oh, my. Well, we all got up and always had breakfast pretty early.
What kind of breakfast would you have?
Oh, we'd have biscuits and gravy, or we'd have cornmeal mush and milk and biscuits. And just things like that. We never did have bacon and sausage. We did in the wintertime. And we'd have some of that sometimes, depending on who was cooking.
And how did you get to church?
In the wagon. We had, where we went to church up there, they had what they call a brush arbor. You know what they are, don't you? Well, they put a framework, great big one, that cover a whole bunch of seats. And in the summertime, that's where we'd have the meetings, we'd have maybe 10 days of, hire a preacher to come and do the preaching. And up until about time before I married, we had the best singers in that whole country. Everybody sung. We had all parts of it. And the singing was what I liked.
What are some of your favorite songs that you remember?
Oh, baby, it's all so old. I don't remember all of the names of them. I'd have to have a book to look and see.
How would your family go to town? How far was the town from where you
It was 14 miles, and we went in the wagon when we kids went. When we went, that was to get our school shoes, And we had 2 pairs of shoes, one for every day and one for Sunday. And when our everyday ones wore out, we'd take the Sunday ones and wear them and buy some new Sunday ones.
And what do you remember about going to town?
Oh, maybe it was so long ago, I just can't remember.
Did you like riding in the wagon? Was that fun when you got to go to town?
That's the only way we had to go. Everybody went in wagons and buggies and what they call hacks back in that time. That big 2-seaters, 2 could sit up here and 2 in the back, and then it had a top on it. But we didn't have that. And we'd go and Mama traded at one store there because we had, if we needed it, we had credit there.
What would she trade? You said she traded.
We'd buy all our stuff there, and that's where we would try on all of the shoes, see if they fit us, And tell you an incident that happened one time when we went to town. Oh, I had to go to the bathroom. Of course, there wasn't none around there. You had to go outside. I was walking around looking out there, and I walked up and I looked down, and there was an old well. Pretty deep. You could see the water in it down there. I almost stepped in it. They'd have never found me if I had fallen in that well. That scared me to death, and I just went back in there and stayed in the store with Mom and them and forgot to go in.
How old were you? Do you remember how old you were when that happened?
I was about 9 or 10. I was just a kid,
Do you remember anything else about going to town?
Well, there was one incident that happened one time. We all went to town, and Papa bought a gallon bucket full of barbecue and gravy and bread. And we all stopped down at the river. We had to cross the river twice going to town. And there's big pecan trees and everything around there. And that was the first time that I ever remember eating a piece of beef. And that was the best stuff I ever tasted. I've thought about that 100 times. And we stayed there until we eat our lunch, and then we went on home. And, of course, by the time we got home, sometimes we was all laying down in the bed of the wagon asleep, because it'd be, late. It'd be dark. Mm-hmm.
What do you remember about the schoolhouse? What do you remember about going to school?
Well, that little one-room schoolhouse up there, I went to it until I was in the 2nd or 3rd grade. I had 2 teachers. One was named Miss Sorrells, and the other one was, we called her Miss Clara. She was a local girl. And she taught, I think, about 2 years there when they consolidated the lower Heck School and the upper Heck School. That's the way we was called down there. And they built this old schoolhouse then down there, almost to the little village down there where the post office was. And I went until 11th grade. Then I quit.
What was your favorite subject at school?
Geometry.
Geometry.
I love geometry.
How many kids were in the school?
I have a picture of the crowd that was in school, and there was, I think, 115 in all, in a little 2-room schoolhouse.
How would you get to school? Did you walk to school?
Walked.
How far was it?
It was about a mile and a half. Once in a while in the wintertime, me and Bud was the only one going to school down there. My brother just younger than I. And he had a pony that we rode quite a lot. And if it was real cold, we'd ride him down there.
Ride the pony?
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it'd be, when we'd get to school, we'd just roast to death, setting up on that. And we didn't run him fast, We just kept him in a kind of a slow trot. And we didn't do that too often, because we didn't have too much bad weather like that. But over the years, just me and Papa went to church. But the reason for that was we had to walk.
You had what?
To walk
To
to church. That's after all the other kids was gone. But Mama never did walk with us because she wasn't able to walk that far. And they had built a tabernacle down there just across the road from where the schoolhouse was. And that's where we used to have such a good singing and good preaching and good eats on Sunday.
What kind of food did your mom cook? What was the best thing that you liked that she would make?
Well, I liked her cobblers. And I liked the way she cooked the pork, when they'd kill the hogs. But outside of that, I just don't remember if I had any special. Because everything we raised was seasonal, like the corn. You eat it or canned it at the right time. Of course, we had watermelons and everything in the world like that, big garden. And I just can't remember what my favorite food was back in those times. But we eat lots of cornbread and milk. In fact, for supper we would have that.
Cornbread?
Mm-hmm, and milk. Or corn mush and milk.
Mic is on.
On Sunday, on the weekend, like on Saturday, we'd bake a cake, maybe a 5-layer cake. And that would be for Sunday's dinner.
kind of
Like
cakes?
when I get
Oh.
a bad start.
We liked, everybody liked pineapple cakes and coconut cakes. And then on Sunday, Mama'd have us to kill about 4 roosters, young roosters out there. And she would cook them up for dinner. Of course, we had beans and potatoes and, things like that went with a big meal. And that's the reason, I guess, that we always had such a crowd on Sunday. Because there wasn't a Sunday past that we didn't have a bunch. Because there's so many of us kids, and all of our kinfolk would come over.
Sounds like a fun time.
And Papa had a sister that had 14 kids. And they come up there a lot. They would come up there and pick our cotton for us, pick cotton. And so they'd be there on Sunday and we'd have a big meal, all anybody could want. And then we'd cook supper, and one time Mama rebelled. She said there will be no more supper cooked on Sunday night here. So it stopped right there. Because there was so many there, we couldn't afford to feed them.
Yeah.
And then after everybody'd gone, we'd usually have cornbread and milk or something like that. Well, lots of times we'd cook biscuits and scramble a bunch of eggs and something like that on Sunday night. But she got tired of that somebody there constantly on the weekend. It worked her to death. Just all of us and all of the kinfolks piled in there. Well, I don't blame her.
So what kind of chores did you have to do outside? What were your outside work?
Well, around the barns like that, we fed the chickens and gathered the eggs. And on weekdays, if the crops was in and growing, we did cotton chopping, we did hoeing, and we did, all of the hoeing on the farm, and there's lots of it to do, too. Papa'd take us up there, and he'd hoe right along with us, and we hoed till a certain hour of the day, and then we could go in for lunch. In fact, we didn't go in until you looked down there and see Mama waving a white flag for us to come to dinner.
What was the hardest chore that you had, or what was the one that you hated the most?
I guess it was picking cotton, Dee, because that is a job. You've got that stoop work, they call it, picking cotton. Dragging your sack behind you. That's about the hardest job we did.
What was your mother like? Describe your mother. What kind of person was she?
She was a kind woman, but she was real strict with us kids. She took care of us, If we were sick, well, that's the one that got the most attention.
What would she do when you were sick? How would she take care of you?
Well, she'd give us medicine. But we never did get sick, maybe a little cold once in a while. We had the measles one time, and we had the chicken pox one time. And in those days, they kept you in the house, out of the light, And in our bedroom, she even put a blanket over the window to keep the light from shining in when we had the measles. And she always seen that we was warm. If we had any fever, she'd usually give us something to bring our fever down. Back then we had aspirin, to take. But she was good. She was good to... In fact, she was a neighbor to everybody. She'd... if someone was sick in the neighborhood and they needed help, she was there to do it. And if they needed somebody to spend the night and sit up all night with them, she would do it. She was what you call a neighbor.
What was her personality like?
Mine.
Like yours? What about your dad? What kind of person was he?
Well, Papa was he was a strict person, but he was good to us kids as long as we minded him. And he'd work right along with us if we was working. Worked just as hard as we did, just as long as we worked with him. And he was, Papa had a short temper. It took a lot to make him mad. But when he got mad, you better scatter.
How would he discipline the kids?
Whip us if we needed it.
How'd he whip you?
With a strap or some willow limbs. Oh, he whipped me and my brother one time. It was, he had some of those willow switches. In fact, he let us go all day long, dreading what he was going to do. We knew what he'd do. And he went up there and he cut him down some willow switches. And there would be those hurt every time he hit us. It'd split our skin. And he really gave us it, but we deserved that one.
What did you guys do to get in trouble? Do you remember?
Well, I don't like to tell this, but I will. Me and Bud, and I think it was this girlfriend of mine, we all went up there and went swimming in that tank. And one of the boys lived across over there ways. He come off over there, and he got in there naked. And he was as old as we was. And Papa happened to come up there and catch us.
So he was skinny dipping.
Oh, yeah. But we had what we bathed in is what we had on. If I had an old dress, that's what I got in there. But we were dressed with something, But that guy, that man, he was that's all he thought about, is getting in a girl's bed. And Papa knew it, see, and we wasn't afraid of the guy. He was the same age we was. We wasn't afraid of him. But Papa knew, more than we did. But we never did do that again. That's the last whipping he ever gave us.
How old were you?
Then?
Yeah.
I was about maybe 12. Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your mom sewing. What would she sew?
She sewed everything except the pants, the men's and boys' pants. She made all of the shirts and the underwear and all of our dresses, our gowns, our underwear. She made them all.
She quilted? Did she quilt?
Oh, yeah.
What was the best quilt she ever made, or the prettiest?
That one she gave to my sister, the red and white one. That was beautiful. But she made it for her. She was one of the twins, and she had she couldn't see much. She had what they call tunnel vision. You know what that is, don't you? And now she married, and she had 4 kids. But her house, her dishes, and her kids and their clothes and everything was always spotless. She would, when she went in and washed her dishes, she couldn't see if they was clean, but she'd feel of them. Take the plates and rub it all in.
She'd know.
She was, her house was clean. I don't see how she done it, but she did. Of course, after the kids got a little bit older, they could sweep and mop and, things like that kids can go into. But she was a real good mother to them.
What was the most important value that your parents taught you?
Oh, to be honest and not lie and try to live a good life, a good Christian life. Because Papa and Mama was really strong.
Strong Christians?
Yeah. In fact, when they married, I think Mama was a Christian, but Papa wasn't. But it wasn't long until he was baptized. And we, when they moved there, well, they bought this place and they gave $15,000 for it. And that was in May, and I was born in October.
How long did you live in the house?
I lived there 26 years.
26 years.
But Papa and Mama lived there long after I married. I don't remember. Maybe they lived there 40 years or maybe longer. But they had the place paid for long before. In fact, I've got the deed to it. I don't have it in my hand, of course, but it's in our family tree information. And what I was going to say. Anyway.
When did you first meet Pappy? Do you remember the first time you saw him?
Oh,
What
yes, I
impression
do.
was?
I sure do. I had a sister that lived in Sanderson. That's out on the border. Not on the border, but out in West Texas. And me and Papa and Mama and my youngest brother went out there to see him one time. I guess I was 17, 18 years old, 19, something like that. And me and my brother-in-law's brothers and sisters got in the car one day and was riding around, you know. And Carl was working at a filling station down there. And we stopped. Of course, they knew Carl real well, but I'd never seen him before. And I thought he was the hatefulest, snootiest thing I ever seen in my life. Smart, elegant.
Why did you think that?
Oh, just the way he acted. You know, just...
Kind of arrogant?
Yeah. And I didn't like it. I thought he was a good-looking guy, but I didn't like him. And I guess it was 2 or 3 years before I seen him again. I went out there and spent a good while with my sister, and we got to seeing each other, dating a little bit. And it was...
Do you remember your first date with him?
Yeah. We just rode around in his car.
What kind of a car did he have?
A Model A. That's when we got cars back then.
So when you were a teenager was when you remember the cars? Teenager?
I think I was about 14, 15, 16 years old before we had a car.
What was the first car that your parents had?
It was a Dodge touring car. Big old thing.
Do you remember what year it was?
No.
No. So, do you remember how Pappy first asked you out? Where you were, or what he said?
He come up there to my sister's house and just asked her, said, let's go riding. And he'd been over there a few times, you know, and I'd been around him a little bit. So we went and drug Main Street up and down the town.
What else did you guys do? What did you do for dates? Do you remember going anywhere? Or?
Who, with him?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'd go to, they'd have dances at somebody's house, you know, especially over at my brother-in-law's house. They lived way out there in the country, away from town. And we'd go to those dances.
Is he a good dancer?
No.
What kind of dancing?
Waltzes and all of those old ones, and I can't remember. Waltzes is the main ones.
Did you like to dance?
Oh, yeah. But Mom and them wouldn't let us go to dances and things like that. Now, they'd have parties around, but we didn't go. Because there's some rough guys in the neighborhood that they didn't like, and they wouldn't let us go. That was even before drinking got to be so prominent.
Do you remember when Pappy asked you to get married?
Yeah. It was funny. He said, let's get married. And I said, okay. He said, well, I'll be in. He was working out of town. Said, I'll be in next Saturday. And we'll get the license. But he didn't get to come in the next Saturday. And I thought, well, there goes that. But he come in the next one. And he got the license before he come to the house. And my brother-in-law's brother and his wife, we was with them, and was, I don't know just how it come up anyway. This other man said, we can go down to the judge's house. He'll marry you. We went down there, and the old judge was fixing to go to bed, but he performed the ceremony.
What were you wearing?
That's the funny part of it. I was wearing a dress that had the back partly out of it, you know, and just a sundress, they called them back then. Mm-hmm. Just a cotton dress. I don't think it had any hose on. But we got married that night. Mm-hmm. It wasn't romantic or anything. It was
And what do you remember about your early years of marriage?
Our early days of marriage was pretty hard, because back then it was during the Depression, you know, back in those days when it's hard to get a job. And the first job he had, he was out of town all week, and I had gone up to his mother's and dad's house close to where he was working, and he'd be gone all week.
Where was he working?
Off down there on one of those ranches, building roads, way down there. Mm-hmm. Might take you half a day to get, you know, anywhere from down there. And we stayed with them for about 6 weeks. I didn't like it. Now, I thought lots of Miss Lambert, but Mr. Lambert, he was funny. I mean, he was I don't know, he wasn't a funny, you know what I mean. But he was a contrarian guy. But she was the best. If anybody in this world went to heaven, she did.
Good Christian woman.
She was she was the type of woman that the man was the head of the house, and what he said goes, regardless. She wouldn't cross him, no way, except over the bills that they had to pay. And that made it hard on her. But she was one of the best women, she and my mother. She was good. She died at age 54. Well, I had 3 of the girls before she died.
3 of your girls?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you got pregnant with Judy?
6 weeks after I married.
6 weeks after you got married? How did you feel?
Well, How
old were you?
I married when I was 26. Let's see, I married in November. And Judy was born the next September. Yeah. And I would get so homesick that I was physically ill, you know, because I was never away from home. To me, they felt like strangers. Though she was good to me and did everything in the world, I still got so homesick I just couldn't hardly stand it.
So did you have Judy in the hospital?
Hmm?
Or was Judy born at home?
No, I was down at my sister's house when she was born.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, Carl had got a job working for a whale driller down there. And I was there with my sister. Of course, Carl would stay out in camp all week, and then they'd come in on the weekend to get groceries and things. And she was born on the 13th of September. And Mama had come out there, and when she was born, I had a terrible time in my pelvic giving, And I was in labor from about 3 o'clock that night until 12, after 12 the next day. And when Judy was born, she had a top knot on her head up here because she was in my pelvic so long, It pushed her head out like that. Carl would go alongside the bed and look at her, He just knew she was deformed.
But she was okay.
Yeah, she's all right. Mama told him, said, Carl, you don't worry about that baby's head. Said, she'll be all right. Said that, and she told him why they'd done that way. Well, he was all right then, but he sure was worried before he found out what caused that.
Mm-hmm. What kind of a child was Judy? What was she like?
She was a real pretty little girl. When she was, I never did cut her hair off for years. And she had real dark auburn hair. And it was long, and it was curly, not real curly, but just to make it look pretty. And, of course, we had her spoiled, and then my brother-in-law and sister would go to town. Well, they'd spoil her for everything. I could say, no, you can't have that. And my sister would get around and give it to her. Anything like that. You know how grandparents would do them. Of course, she wasn't a grandparent, but that's the way she did. And the only thing about her was her feet. Something was wrong with her feet when she was little. And she was always knock-kneed. But we couldn't ever have enough money to go and have her shoes made, that would fit her. Because we would have to go to San Antonio, and we couldn't afford that. We were just barely making a living. And then after she got up, I don't know, she wasn't. Well, she learned to walk after I moved out in camp with him. We bought a little old trailer house, little homemade one. And we moved out in camp with him. And then when she was about, I don't know how much older she is than Alice, we had her. But I didn't have a bad time that time.
So Alice was pretty easy pregnancy?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was Alice like as a little girl?
She had golden curly hair. Prettiest hair you ever seen. And she was a little fat, chubby little girl. And fair complexion, and she's the best baby I had. We'd go to town on Saturday to get her groceries and spend the night with my sister. And when she was little, before she began to walk or even crawl, there was so many of them around her that somebody had her all the time playing with her. Mm-hmm. And that baby got so tired. She'd just get so ill-natured that nobody could do anything with her but me. And we'd get in the car to go home, get out there. I'd pitch her over on the bed, and she'd lay right there and play and drop off to sleep. And when she started sitting alone, I could put her anywhere, give her something to play with, and she'd play for hours. She never did cry. She was really a good baby. And Judy wasn't a bad baby, but we, being her first one, we kind of spoiled her.
What was Judy like as a teenager as she got older? What's her personality like?
Judy was always a level-headed girl. No foolishness went on around her. And if she was around somebody and they used some kind of dirty word, boy, she would really get on them. Tell them not to use no kind of language like that in her presence. And she didn't date much. You know, she's in high school. And then when she finished high school, she went in for x-ray training in Lubbock. And that's where she met Bill, her husband now. And they went together until she finished that school. Then she got a job where she was going to school. And then he was there for a little while, and then he went into training. And after he got his training, then they both worked there for a while. And they got along pretty good. Of course, they just like me, they started having babies.
What about Alice? What was she like as a teenager?
She was kind of, I wouldn't know hardly how to describe her. She's always even-tempered, and she always had a crowd around her. She was the type that, come on over to our house. Come on over to my house. And she was always had somebody like that over at the house, you know. Of course, that base was out there, and I worked out there for a long time. She got acquainted with a lot of the boys out there, you know. And of course, when she'd see them, y'all come over Sunday, we'll have dinner. And she dated one or two boys from the base, but not much. Of course, she's a little bit young back in that day. And Judy dated one of the boys from the base out there. He was a student pilot. He was from Holland. And we really did like him. He's a good kid. In fact, if he hadn't been a good kid, he wouldn't have been dating Judy. But he had to go home after he finished his training. But he sure was a nice boy.
What about Kathy? What was Kathy like as a little girl?
She was a rebel.
She was strong-willed.
Oh, boy. Carl's sister and a friend of ours had two boys the same age as Kathy. You know, I mean, this little kids growed up together. And those three kids gave me more trouble than all of the others put together.
Like what?
They was always into things. You know, climbing on top of the garage out there and, you know, getting out there and gathering up a bunch of red ants and putting them in cans and trying to catch bumblebees and everything like that.
She was active.
Oh, yeah. And they'd get into trouble, and I'd run the boys home. They'd get way off out there, you know, and I'd walk out of the house with my fly swatter in the hand, and I said, now, you get on home, you stay there. They just lived a block or two up from us. And they were good kids, but they were just three kids, and they was always into something, doing something. And when she started school, or after she got in high school, she wasn't in high school, but they had the two schools together, you know. She'd go to school, and she had a friend over there that she'd known for a long time after we moved over there. And this girl had married. And she lived about a block and a half from the school. I'd take Kathy to school in the morning and drop her off and go on to work. I was working at the base. And she would make out like she was going into the schoolhouse, and then when I got out of sight, she went over to this girl's house and skipped school. Not once or twice, but dozens of times. In fact, the teachers would call me, you know, to see what was wrong. I told them, you know. And I told her one time, I said, you're going to stay in school. If I have to come up there and sit in the room with you, you're going to stay there. Now, you just pull that again and you see what happens. But she didn't pull it. If she did, I didn't know about it. They didn't call me on it. But she'd do something and I'd get my fly swatter after her and she'd run from me. She could not stand still. She'd just take off me right behind her. finally got to where I couldn't catch her.
Okay. What about Andrea? What was Andrea like as a child?
She was a pretty good little kid. She was really a pretty little girl. She had dark hair, and it was naturally curly. And everybody always noticed her because she had such a pretty hair, and she had big, pretty eyes, and complexion was just perfect, you know. And I could always dress her, you know, because I did sewing back then, too. And she was a pretty good kid until she got up 14, 15, 16 years old. And then she, before that, she got the dating a boy from the base out there, and I didn't know it. And then we was living out there west of Big Springs, the edge of Big Springs. And she'd got in with this bunch that she knew. And I liked the people, that this girl, parents. And this boy, he was in that gang. And they run off and got married when she was about 14 and a half years old. Or 15, something like that. In fact, then they slipped off and left town and went to Dallas. I didn't know where she was for, a week or 10 days or longer. Finally, I went up there and jumped onto his mother. "Oh, they haven't called you yet?" I said, "I want to know where they are, or where my daughter is." And she told me, finally. And I called up there, and they was staying in a motel, motel. And I called the office at this smoke place, and I got the woman that run it. And I told her who I was trying to get a hold of, and she said, "Oh, yes, she's here." I said, "I'll have to go get her." And she went and got her. She said, this woman said, "I'm so glad you called her." Because this boy had beat up on her and slapped her and bursted an eardrum. He was real mean to her. And after I called her, talked to her, I think I sent her some money in care of this woman. And she come home. And I had made her so many pretty dresses and things, and of course she took most of them with her. And when she come home, she had a suitcase full of old shoes. She didn't bring another rag with her. And why she did that, I don't know. But she was pregnant when she came home. But she didn't marry. She didn't. She divorced him after Charlie was born. And I never did see him again. He got killed in a car wreck. He drank just like that gang all did. His mother and all of that gang. He was a raunchy kid. He didn't even know how you celebrated Christmas. But he wouldn't come over there on Christmas Day.
Who's been the most influential person in your life?
I believe it's my youngest brother.
Your youngest what?
My youngest brother.
Why?
Well, we were real close. After Bud married and he died, my brother just younger than me, he died when he was 19 years old. And then me and Sterling we was at home several years after he died, And we went places together, and did things together. And I believe he had more influence on my life than anyone.
So you guys grew up together?
Yeah.
What was he like?
Well, hon, I don't know how to explain him to you. He's a good guy. He was married. They had how many kids? 4. And they lived there close to us all the time until Papa and Mama sold the old place. And then, of course, he had a job in town when in Menard when they sold the place. But he was like Papa. He was high-tempered if he got mad, but he didn't. He controlled his temper. But he was good to his family or anybody else that come along. And but he finally woke up to the fact that those guys down in that community that he knew was working him. They'd come by and say, "We should look at my motor on my car. It's just not doing very good." He'd go out there and work on it, get it running. And one day he woke up to the fact that while he was out there working on their car, they were sitting in the house drinking his coffee. So he quit. He never did. I say he never did do it anymore. He might have helped somebody. But he's a good guy. And helped anybody in the world that needed it.
Kind of like your mom.
Mm-hmm.
What's the best advice anyone's ever given you?
I don't remember.
What would be your advice to someone who's just starting, someone who's in their early 20s, and they've got their whole life ahead of them? What have you learned from life that you could tell them?
Well, if they were married, if they was getting married, I'd tell them marriage is from now on. And that you each had to be 50-50. And treat each other like that, Because that's the way me and Carl was when we married. Anything that come up, he always asked me about it or told me about it, And he was a person like his mother. He was a good neighbor, too. However, in his later years, he got to where he didn't like to be away from home at all. He wanted to be at home. So we stayed at home.
What about raising kids? What would be your advice for someone about raising kids or parenting?
I really don't know. The one thing is teach them to mind you. Not let them get the upper hand of you, because I've seen so much of that over the years. I guess I'd be about it. Just, not let them get away from them.
Any other questions? What about inventions? You've been around, you've seen a lot of inventions. You saw the cars, TV. Which one strikes you as the most that you thought, wow?
A camera.
A camera?
Yeah, a camera.
Do you remember the first camera you ever had or saw? Or?
Yeah, I had a little bit of a little box camera, about so big, and I forget what they called them. Anyway, it was some of the first ones that we used back in those days.
How old were you? Remember?
Oh, I guess I was 16, 17 years old back when I first got one.
What was the Depression like when you were newlywed?
Oh, my goodness.
Could you describe what the country was like or how it affected you guys?
Well, we had a hard time during that Depression because anything you had to sell was cheap. You couldn't get a good price out of it. And, that Depression lasted a long time. We did without things that we thought before that we couldn't do without, but we did. We made back then they started selling chicken feed in 50-pound sacks, and the sacks was printed, real pretty print. We made our dresses and our blouses out of that, and some of the women would make their husbands some underwear out of them, and they'd make drapes out of them. Because everybody had chickens, and you could sell the eggs for so much a dozen. I don't remember how much, but not much. And that's the way they'd get those sacks. And there was one lady living down there below where we lived, and she would trade sacks for some like she wanted to make her some drapes. She made those, and she matched up all of the flowers and everything. Those prettiest things you ever seen. They were just perfect. And then we did things like that. We made curtains out of them, cook aprons, pillowcases. Whatever we needed, that's what we used them for. The last dress I made out of them, it was a white background with green print on it. Well, they had some pretty ones back then. All kinds of prints. And Papa'd ask us what kind we wanted when he'd go to town, was going to get some feed. Of course, we couldn't tell him. But he'd, anything that looked pretty to him, that's what he'd get for us.
What was the happiest time period in your life?
Happiest time.
Happiest time.
I guess it was back when when my kids was all at home. That is, like me and Sterling and Bud and
when you were growing up.
When I was growing up. Because back then we didn't have any worries. I mean, we kids didn't. And we had a good. To me, it is a good life. And I believe that, of course, we had lots of friends there, and I believe that was really the happiest, I'll say it was the most contented time I ever had. It might not have been the happiest, but the most contented time. Papa was a contented man. He worked that farm there, and he worked hard on that to make a living for his family. And he was contented with what he had. He didn't say, oh, so-and-so's got something over there, I sure would like to have it. He didn't do that.
What do you like to do? What's your hobby? What do you like to do?
I guess sewing was my hobby when I could do it. Because I made my grandkids no telling how many pairs of shorts and tops. But I learned from Mama. She'd sit down to the machine to sew, and I stood right there by her and watched everything she did. And I think that's how I learned to sew. And then when I started having my little girls, well, that's what I did. In fact, when Judy was little, I got several pieces of material, just a yard each. That more than made her a little dress. And I sat up in the middle of the bed with her. I'd cut the little dresses out. And I'd sit up there in the middle of the bed with her, and I'd sew on my hands and make those little dresses while she played or was asleep.
What else do you like to do? You like to sing?
Sing. I used to. Oh, I love to sing. Of course, now my voice is giving out till I can't hardly sing anymore. I've always sang alto. There was a woman in church that sang alto, and I always sat close to her so I could learn to sing alto.
What's about the hardest time in your life? The hardest week? You didn't think
Hardest time in my life? I guess it's when we lost Mama. Not really, I don't think, because Papa lived 1 year after she died. And losing them so close like that was real hard.
How'd you get through it?
You just knew. You just knew. I don't know how to explain it. Just like after Carl died, there was nothing. You would never know how hard it was. Living with him nearly 60 years and then giving him up, that was too darn hard. That was just like losing your thighs, losing your arms, or losing your legs, and it was so much missing.
You hold on to faith you're going to see him again someday?
Yeah. But it's the loneliness is what hurts. I never go to sleep at night, but when I think about him for, no telling how long, you know.
He's really special to you? How was he special to you?
Well,
What's special about your relationship?
He's just the man that I loved, and he was the father of my children, and he was a good father and a good husband. Period.
Good man.
And do you know he never did get mad at me and roar and bitch and fuss. Now we'd get mad at each other, but we'd clam up and we'd talk about it. And then we're off and then it was all right. But that's hard. I know when Mama died, I just didn't know how Papa was going to go through that. But he did. And he just lived a year after she died. But they'd been married nearly 65 years.
Wow.
And that's a long time to live with one person. That's a long time. But you know, Carl had got so bad, so sick, till it was really not on my part, but on his part, to go ahead and go, because he was in such a shape that I don't think he'd ever got out of bed, even if he'd lived. That's a piece of stuff. Oh. Yeah, let's see. What else can I talk about?
Talk to your 4 daughters. What would you say to your 4 daughters?
Tend to their own business.
About life? Huh?
Tend to their own business.
Tend to their own business?
No. My girls have done all right. Of course, Alice and Kathy and Andrew have been married before, but I don't think their first husbands are worth killing. But they got some pretty good men now.
Yep.
I know they're all good to me. And Lee's kind of like Hoppy. He is always, can I do that? Do you want this? You know. And Lee'd go to town, and after I had that surgery, he'd go to town and come back with me a milkshake, because that's all I could drink that was good.
What kind of milkshake? Vanilla?
Vanilla.
Vanilla.
Mm-hmm. But I didn't have an appetite. What I eat, it wasn't because I wanted it. It was so I could live. Mm-hmm. And we, going back to my family, my brother died when he was 19. My oldest brother died when he was 50-something, maybe close to 60. And my sister Alice died when she was about she might have been in her 60s. They all died young. I mean, considered young, now. And okay. And there was 9 of us kids in the Papa and Mama. And then my last brother-in-law died. Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago. There was 16 of them died in, over about 30 years. When my youngest brother died, he had an enlarged heart, and half of it wasn't working. And he went to San Antonio and had heart surgery. He died on my operating table. And then Judy had a little boy. He was about 8, I guess, and he got killed in an elevator accident. Now that's the only one in my immediate family. That was Big Judy's little boy.
Let's end on a happy note. What would you tell your daughters and your granddaughters about how to be a good Christian woman and to be a lady? What advice would you give them? What makes a lady?
Somebody that keeps her mouth shut.
What do you mean?
Well, you just stop and think of how they talk this day and time.
Mm-hmm.
Take Christina for an example. If you all haven't heard her, she's a rough-talking little girl. Never use language like that. And I just have an idea that Kathy's 2 little girls uses the same kind of language. Kathy's little girls. And my youngest girl, you know who I'm talking about, was talking on the phone one day to Charlie's ex-wife. And they got into a really row. Directly she slammed up the receiver and she come through that living room swinging her arms like that and said, "That's so-and-so and so-and-so." She used language that I wouldn't have thought she'd used. I told her about it too. Terrible. Is the telephone ringing? Girls is like boys. They have to have somebody to pattern their life after. You know that. However, I didn't want my girls to pattern their life after mine because I was a contrary old sister when they was little. But I raised some pretty good girls.
It wasn't easy though, was it?
No, sure wasn't. And then you take Alice's first husband, and Kathy's first husband and that gink that Andrew married. Outside of them, all of our family was good. I don't know whether the boys has ever beat up on them or not. But a woman should stand up for her rights, and if a man hit her, pick up something and knock him in the head. That's the way I feel about when a man abuses a woman. Carl never hit me in his lifetime. Mm-mm. And he never called me any names or nothing like that. You know.
He's a respectable man.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. But anyway, life isn't as easy as people think it's going to be.
So how would you tell someone? How do you get through the hard times? What do you do?
Well, if you lose someone, you just have to grieve and get it.
You lean on Jesus?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you know, I believe that prayer will do anything.
I do too.
I really do. You know, when I was so sick, the church there in Tazewell, they prayed for me all the time. And even people down where Zach and Laura went to school, they did.
I do too. I think that's how you get through hard times, is you keep praying.
Mm-hmm.
You pray.
Mm-hmm.
You lean on the Lord.
I think that's one of the things that's helped me get through losing Pappy. But I don't think I would have lived as long as I have unless there's some reason that God's not letting me die yet.
He has you here for a reason.
For a
You're still
reason.
influencing other people.
I can't figure out what it is yet, but maybe I will before I die.
It's a good place to end.
It's too hungry to get mad with this chat.
All right.
What were you going to say, Granny?
I don't know.
You made her cry.
Yeah, was that enough tears?
I didn't get enough laughter. I got enough tears for both of you.
Don't take me.
Well, I could tell you something that was...
You're not before you, Granny. Stop that.
something funny that happened to Pappy, or happened to me and Pappy. After his health began to get so bad, he had a skip. His heart would skip beats once in a while, and you'd see him sit around like this, feeling for his pulse. Just nearly any time you went, when he was sitting in there in the chair, you'd see him feeling his pulse, because his heart skipped a beat. Well, mine does too. One day I was in the dining room in there, and he come in there and said, "Mama, I can't feel my pulse." I said, "Pappy, lay down, you're dead." I made him so mad he could
He had a kind of a weird sense of humor, and that wasn't his style.
That wasn't his style, no. But he had done that for so long, I had seen him. And my heart will skip beats once in a while, especially like at night. And it didn't worry me too much, because his heart just skipped a beat once in a while. But it wasn't, I laughed.
Y'all, Granny was talking a while ago about getting to go to town, once in the wagon. I'm just bringing up something so she can talk. Are you having fun?
You don't think the kids nowadays
Realize what a thrill that was.
That's what I was thinking about.
Mhm.
How much fun that would be.
Well, it's like my...
Got to go. We went to town twice a year. in the spring, after winter, and in the fall before school started. That was how often we got to go to town until we got older.
That's what's amazing. Kids don't realize. Well, you never knew growing up. You never knew anything different. That you were having fun. And you put a kid nowadays back then, they think they died.
Oh yeah, they get so bored now.
Well, it's like when of course, we lived in town most of our life, but we used to go to the movie on Saturday, and we didn't miss the movie. I don't care how sick you was, hardly.